in 2024. In the House, it's Angela Cockerham, Mississippi House of Representatives, District 96. Is that me or you? Adams, Emmett, Pike, and Wilkerson County. I don't know who that is here. Let's see. It's not me, it's you.
Hey, that's what they always say, huh? I think we got it figured out, though.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Angela, they're just going to hear us on reverb. So how are you doing, ma'am? Good to have you.
Absolutely great, Paul Gallo. How are you this morning?
I'm good. Let me ask you this. Can you hear the reverb?
No, I don't hear it. Wait a minute. Now I do.
Do you do hear it?
I do.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because the gremlins are in here, and we can't get them out.
Yeah. I'm gonna sneak in there and make sure nothing's on. I've done that, but yeah, go for it.
Paul, we will work through it.
Well, we have men. We just do. Sometimes you try to track these things down, but the complex of the more you add on as far as digital enhancement, the more gremlins that you are possibly going to get. Which, matter of fact, I think we saw in the House yesterday, for a second, I saw Jason White getting reverb or something, and he had to figure out where that was coming from.
I actually thought about that when you started talking about the gremlins a few moments ago, is that we had that yesterday on the House floor.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of your analysis of yesterday's first day of the session.
I thought the first day of the session was absolutely great. We got sworn in. We had Speaker White get elected and sworn in as Speaker, and then our pro tem, Manley Barton, and also our House Clerk. I enjoyed all the nomination speeches, and it was really good. I tell you this, Paul, to see all the families. You know, we have 25 new House members. And so to see the returning colleagues, as well as to have the opportunity to meet some of my new colleagues as well as their families, it doesn't get any better. So I thought we were off to a great start, and we're rocking and rolling.
I appreciated Jason White giving some time to Philip Gunn and his service over the past 12 years. I thought it was classy.
It was very classy. You know that he has been our pro tem for the last 4 years, but even before that, working closely with Philip and crafting the policy to move Mississippi forward. I also appreciated in his speech as well the idea of creativity, inclusion, and I don't know if you were able to see this throughout yesterday after we proceeded with some of the other nominations and elections, for instance, for pro tem and clerk, just to have the opportunity to see glimpses of his personality while he was on the speaker stand, and to know that he's bringing his own flair, if you will, to being speaker. And as I reflected on his speech also, I really was happy, especially for me being from a rural area, to hear him talk about rural communities throughout the state of Mississippi. So I thought overall he has a good speech, and you can tell he's put some thought into how he wants to move Mississippi forward, and I look forward to working with him as well as my other colleagues as we do that.
I was pleased because we've had a lot of interviews with Jason over the years, and in the context of the speech that he wrote, and as you mentioned, probably took a lot of time in putting it together, didn't divert from what we know of him. Exactly. And as you also know, that in the past, in 4 years from now, we'll look a little differently as far as our hair, a bit grayer, but we will also formulate our confidence in 4 years, and at the end of 4 years, starting on a second term or another term, should it be, he may be a lot different, more concrete in those values of what he can do and can't do. I guess my question to you is, will a speaker change? Do politicians change in that 4-year period? I'm not saying for the worse or for better. Do they just kind of change over the 4-year period?
So that's a very good question. I think your core values and who you are, I don't know if that necessarily changes. You may find out through the course of, because I've been serving 18 or 19 years, you may find out that issues change and you may have to adjust a little bit. But by the time you get to the Capitol, and I think that's anywhere in life, regardless of whether you're elected or you're a teacher, you're working in the medical field,
Yeah.
or if you're, working in corporate America, if you're a parent, I think that's just human nature. You know who you are, what your
Yeah.
values are, and hopefully you'll meet people who may have different ideas, different from yours. But I think that's where maturity comes in, Paul, where you're able to sit down and say, okay, this isn't working. I may need to pivot a little bit,
That's
or
it.
maybe I need
That's it.
to take into consideration this other person's viewpoint. I don't think the House is supposed to be an echo chamber. I just don't. I think where you really get to the meat of your legislation is where you have different ideas. And if you see that you're able to make adjustments, you do that. That's why I alluded to yesterday how I'm so pleased to see that Speaker White, we're able to see his personality on
Yeah.
the speaker's stand, because I think he's going to be the type of speaker who says, okay, if this isn't working, then let me go out and get what
That's
I
it.
need to make those changes.
That's in that 4 years of experience where that personality kind of solidifies, because you know two things. First of all, a good friend of ours in the program for many, many years was Chairman Jack Gordon, Senator Gordon,
Yes.
who often had this wonderful saying that you don't chase the rabbits you can't catch. So you kind of get that experience after 4 years. What fights can you win? And that kind of solidifies that personality.
Yeah, you don't want to win the battle and lose the war. And I think ultimately what we're all striving for in the House and the Senate, that's Speaker White, the Lieutenant Governor, Delbert Hosemann, Governor Reeves, the members of the House and the Senate, what we're all trying to do is make Mississippi a better place and to move it forward and make sure it's a better place for our babies. And so sometimes, to answer your question, you may see, okay, I need to make a few tweaks here, but I think you have to have the courage and the maturity to do that.
You, speaking of maturity and also courage, you are a remarkable lady, because not anybody before you, and you're talking about breaking the glass ceiling, you decided to leave the Democrat Party, become an independent, which I guess you still are.
I am.
And that road is, I don't know, you just get a feeling that there are more people who feel that in the African-American community, not only in Mississippi, but certainly nationwide. And it's a changing transition time when you start looking at some of the polls and some of the demos across the country. Maybe because of the ideology, maybe because of this president, but you as a noted lawyer, your thoughts on this, not only as a lawyer, but as a woman and an African-American.
So I'm happy to see the changes. I think that you do have more and more people who are saying, you know what, I'm an independent. I want to view all the issues as a whole, not segmented. I'll tell you this. So after I became an independent back in 2019, I can remember, because, when you run as an independent, you have to go out, knock on doors, get signatures. It's a very long and tedious process. And so I broke it up. We were in session, and so I decided, okay, I'm going to break it up because I needed so many signatures and I needed to do in phases. And so as I went throughout my district, I'm so grateful that my constituents said, Angela, I don't care if you're Republican, I don't care if you're Democrat, I'm going to vote for you because of what you stand for. And I've started looking at the issues in this way. If we segue, Paul, to 2023, as you know, I came out strongly in support of Governor Reeves. And so when that commercial hit, I started getting flooded with phone calls. And you probably saw some of the feedback that was on social media. But I'm proud to say this, in the African American community and just in the state as large, I had so many people who would stop me on the street, who would see me in grocery stores, who would say, and they reached out personally to me to say, you know what, Angela, I'm looking at things differently, and I'm happy for the support that the state of Mississippi has given me through this journey and this walk. and happy to have the opportunity to shape the
Yeah.
policy for the state of Mississippi.
Yeah, it's hard to understand that Twitter is not the whole universe. It doesn't reflect the entire voting population out
It
there.
does
Number
not.
one, and number two, believe it or not, even for talk show hosts, a lot of these negative Twitters are manufactured out there for the
Bots.
purpose of doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing.
But, right. And so
Right.
you can't look to Twitter. I mean, you've really just got to be
Yeah.
in touch with your constituency. I always say this, service.
Hold on. I want. Can you finish that thought when we come back? Because
Sure.
we got lots more, and I want to ask you about school choice also. When we return with back with Angela Cockerham, Mississippi House of Representatives, District 96. Just give me an idea when the committees are going to be appointed. Do you have any idea?
I don't know. So Speaker White, he gave us forms for the committee selection, what our Christmas wish list would be, if you will, for the committees. And so those are due on Friday. So we'll turn those in and we'll see where it goes from there. Obviously, so since having been in office with McCoy, Gunn, and now Speaker White, usually the speaker has free reign in how those committee appointments and that selection process goes. So looking forward to see what his choices for the committees are. I think too, going into this as well, and this is kind of what my thought process has been since I've been elected, is that there can be no small jobs in the House. I mean, there are 122 of us. And so obviously, I'm sure any speaker, if they could appoint every member to a vice chairmanship or chairmanship, they would. But again, by Speaker White being speaker, he gets to determine who those men and women are going to be. And I think having been in the shoes of having to be able to help and assist with the shaping of the policy for the state of Mississippi for the last 18 years. Again, I'm excited to see what those selections are, and we'll move forward.
Your wish list the same as on judiciary?
I want to serve wherever I can be helpful. I will tell you this. I have enjoyed serving as Judiciary A chair. I also enjoyed serving as Energy chair. I also enjoyed serving as Judiciary B. I'm fluid, I will say this, in where I
But you've
serve.
got a wish list somewhere. Which one would you like to land on?
I would like to land where I can be most helpful in making sure that I'm serving the state of Mississippi and the people. I've never, my whole mindset, you got to remember, Paul, so when I got elected in 2005, for the first 2 years, I was just learning. I mean, I was sitting there because I wanted to learn the rules, everything. Then the next term, I was vice chair of Judiciary A, and since then, I've been in a role of some chairmanship capacity. However, I can best serve the state of Mississippi and also assist Chairman White in whatever his goals are for this term, that's where I want to be. Obviously, my effectiveness is not in question from my past experience, but you've got to have a little bit of humility, and again, that's where maturity comes into mind as well, because you want to make sure that you're in lockstep with your House and your colleagues and your speaker, and not necessarily being anti-everything. That was one of my goals and prayers for this particular session, is to make sure that I come in with a positive attitude, ready to go to work. So to answer your question, I really don't have any kind of Christmas wish list in terms of committee assignments. I think wherever I am, I'll be effective and I'll be able to help.
Let me ask you the procedure on this one. Does the speaker make all of the announcements and then do this, or can he dish them out in partial, a few here, a few there, or does he wait for them all to be formulated and then announce them?
So
Not piecemeal.
historically in the past, they have been announced all at one time.
At one time, okay.
However, I will just insert a caveat. Sometimes I think that there can be a situation, say for instance, an emergency may arise. Prayerfully, nothing of that nature happens. But if something of that situation did arise, then I think that would be in the speaker's gambit to make announcements as he needs to. If you listen to his speech yesterday, he talked about doing a change with the Appropriation Committee and having these 4 additional chairmen, if you will, or subcommittee chairmen for appropriations, and making sure that we have all of our budgets completed by tax day, April 15th, right? And so I was talking with some friends yesterday as we went to his reception, and they were like, oh, can he make that change? Because we've not had the appropriations process set up like that. And obviously, you'll see in the coming days where the rules will meet. Typically what happens, rules will meet. And sometimes there are rules changes. And so that can be built in to the rules changes. So to answer your question, it can happen if you are able to change the rules. And I think it's within his preview to make announcements as he needs to, but typically it's done all at one time.
I do want to ask you this, because there's a lot of talk before the session and through the summer in the Senate as well as in the House. We have too many committees out here, and we need to pare some of them down. We have committees that don't even meet anymore, and we're naming chairmen to those committees. Is that a process still forthcoming in the Rules Committee, or is that not going to be taken up this year to pare down some of the committees?
It's very well possible. I think the lieutenant governor, for instance, this is an example. Yesterday, he announced a new committee. And so you have speakers who add committees. You have some speakers who rename committees. For instance, oil and gas became energy. And I remember a few years ago, now Mayor Toby Barker, he chaired a special committee that dealt with the legislative budget process and accountability for the legislative budget process. So it's completely, when you're speaker or you're lieutenant governor, you have the right. It's completely within your autonomy to add committees or pare them down. But you hinted on a good point, and I'll just stick a pin right here, Paul. It's all about efficiency and making sure, because one of the things we hear so much, as you know, Paul, and I hear it all the time, is that sometimes in government there's too much red tape.
Yeah.
And so
I do want to ask you this before we run out of time here. And I guess the speech he gave yesterday could go down in the history books as the Chasing Lions speech, because he basically said we don't need to be the ones that lions are coming after us. We need to be chasing the lions. And I'm paraphrasing that, of course. But in that speech, he talked about the need for families, parents, school choice. And it seems to me it's going to be one of the biggest fights, maybe behind the scenes. I don't know where we're going to go with that. I really don't even know if there's any movement as far as the Black Caucus and the Democrat side with their thought process, or the Democrats as a whole. But it is kind of weird that one of the best ways to get us out of poverty is going to be through education. And we have a lot of the people who are in good schools, in good areas that have good schools, are saying we don't want to mess with them. But that's just kind of throwing the people who are in some of the rural schools that are failing out the baby with the bathwater. Your thoughts on that? Where do we go with this?
Good point. So I'm a firm believer in public education. My dad was a teacher, so my dad taught at the schools in Amen County for about maybe 37, 38 years. And so, firm believer in public education. I also think, Paul, though, parents should have a choice, or we should not rule out the ability for a parent to say, I want my child to go to this particular school, or I want my child to attend that particular school. It takes, we hear it takes a village, but it really does. I think you see some school districts throughout the state who are really flourishing in terms of their attendance. The other thing that Speaker White talked about yesterday was looking at revising the formula. And, we tried to, or there was
Yes.
some discussion or an effort to do that a few years ago as well. So I think moving forward, as you continue to hear this discussion and we kind of hammer out what that looks like, again, it's not supposed to be an echo chamber, and it could turn out to be very good for the students, which is what it's supposed to be about, our babies.
I think when you talk about finding middle ground, this is going to be the poster boy of finding middle ground. It's going to be school choice in whatever form it happens to be when we get through with the session. Final thoughts coming up from Angela Cockerham. And again, congratulations to Representative Barton. He is the new president or the Speaker Pro Tem in the Mississippi House, Manley Barton. And we'll talk more with him a little bit later on, and hopefully we'll get him on the air soon. Back with more coming up. Angela Cockerham has final thoughts here, but before we get to final thoughts, I want to ask you this. Even with not knowing where your assignments are going to be right now, what's number 1 or 2 or 3 for you as far as, and I'm looking at the hopper here, there's no new bills in the hopper, just some resolutions so far, so it's still clean and empty, but what's number 1 in your mind?
In terms for me personally?
Submitting bills,
legislation.
regardless of committee.
Yeah, so as you know, I have worked very closely as JEDA chair with AOC on the mental health courts and the courts of intervention and the Supreme Court. So there is some legislation that I want to do to continue those efforts, and it's been a joy of mine to work with some colleagues, like I've worked with Representative Felch or Representative Tommy Reynolds, who's now retired, and all of the JEDA committee on that. So that is top on my list. I will say, too, that there's some domestic violence legislation that I have been thinking about. I haven't worked it out in my head just completely how to structure it, and I really want to tap Sandy Middleton for this as well, because she and I talked about a few issues that had arisen last year. And so I want to work with her on that, and also the domestic violence prevention. That association has some legislation. And this past year, Chairman Wiggins and I, we co-chaired an adoption task force. We started meeting during the summer, and we had a report that we submitted to the legislature December 1st. And so that group, let me say, hands down, one of the most, in terms of talent and the ideas that came forth from that committee, absolutely terrific. I want to see some of that legislation, because the committee worked overall so hard on coming up with some possible reforms to make sure that we continue to have the adoption process running smoothly and effectively. Mm-hmm. So those are some of my top 3.
Are there things that we could do to make it easier, that all we have to do is just pass a law?
There's some things that I think that could help with foster care, with TPRs, termination of parental rights, yes. And so out of that committee, we had Commissioner Sanders on that committee, Justice Beam, and some really good judges, some good advocates who were on that committee. So it was a good report. And if you're late at night, if you want something to watch, you don't want to watch TV, or you don't want to watch any of the playoff games, football games, all of those hearings are on our website.
Look, call me. If anybody makes that choice, call me and let me know. You are very dedicated. I understand what you're talking about. Is that going to be even more important now because of Dobbs and the abortion ruling by the Supreme Court in the state of Mississippi?
Yes, it is.
Have you seen any numbers on that at all?
I have not. Last year we had some great legislation that passed that the House and the Senate came forward on post-Dobbs, and so we're building on that. But again, if you don't want to see my Cowboys win this weekend and you're just tired of watching football, then go
Or
take
if
a
they're losing and as punishment, you want to do that. So
Yeah, the governor signed all of our bills into legislation, and I can say he's been a big advocate for that legislation as well. So it's a great time to be in Mississippi. It's a great time to be in the legislature.
I agree.
And I'm just thankful to have the opportunity to serve and to work with such great men and women all across the board.
I have another number we were looking at. This is from one of the moving people. I have the story in here somewhere. One of the states where more people are moving into down south, according to this rental only, but they have their numbers and they can pull them up with AI now and everything else, is that there were quite a few people moving in from the north to Arkansas. And then we talked about Arkansas school choice. We talked about Arkansas refining their unemployment. And if you can get a job, you better go get a job. And I mentioned some of those things yesterday that Governor Sanders is doing. And they are going to be a heck of a competitor to our getting more people down south and into the state of Mississippi. So we have a lot of competition out there. But that said, there's some good things happening in our state.
There's some great things happening in our state, Paul, and I'd be more than happy. I'm always a friend. I welcome the opportunity to come back at any time
please do.
to talk
Please
about
do.
it.
I'm going to put you on my top 10 list here for 2024, and I thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you. It's always a
got it.
pleasure.
Thank you. Angela Cockerham, Mississippi House of Representatives.